There's a moment in every relationship where the truth becomes undeniable, not through words, not even through grand gestures, but through the subtle, almost hidden shifts in behavior, especially when we're talking about someone with an avoidant attachment style. Because let's be honest, avoidants don't love the way movies show love. They don't express themselves the way we expect. In fact, sometimes they seem cold, distant, or even detached. But what if I told you that their silence doesn't mean absence of love? What if the real sign that an avoidant is in love is not in what they say, but in what they can't help but do? Today, I'm going to reveal the 6 unmistakable signs that an avoidant is falling in love with you and what to do about it. You see, one of the most powerful and telling signs that an avoidant is falling in love is something that might seem small on the surface, but it's monumental in their world. They start letting you into their private world. And make no mistake, for someone with an avoidant attachment style, that is sacred territory. It's not about them just spending time with you or replying to your texts. It's about revealing the parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime protecting, parts that they've learned to guard fiercely, sometimes even from themselves. Avoidants don't easily open up. They've built a life around emotional safety and boundaries. Not because they're heartless, not because they're indifferent, but because somewhere in their past, closeness was linked with pain. So they created a fortress. Strong, cold, untouchable. Not because they wanted to hurt anyone, but because they wanted to survive. So when you suddenly find yourself being invited into that sacred space, you're not just being welcomed into their life. You're being welcomed into their trust. And for them, that is love. It starts subtly. One day they mention a story from their childhood they've never told anyone. It just slips out. Maybe they brush it off after. Maybe they act like it wasn't a big deal, but it was. Or they show you their favorite place they go to when they need to think. They don't bring just anyone there. Or they start sharing the playlist they only listen to when they're feeling broken. These aren't just stories or songs. These are windows into the soul of someone who has been hiding behind closed curtains for years. And let me tell you something else, this doesn't happen fast. It's not a grand, dramatic movie moment. It's a slow unwrapping. They'll test the waters, share a little, then pull back. Then maybe share again. And in those moments, your reaction matters more than you think. If you judge them, rush them, or try to fix them, the door closes again. But if you just hold space, if you listen, if you stay calm, if you show that you're few, that you're many, where you become the one person in their life who feels safe, and that's when love really starts to bloom. Because when an avoidant begins to feel safe with you emotionally, something inside them shifts. The walls don't just crack, they restructure. They start looking at you not as a threat, but as an ally. Someone who won't use their vulnerability against them. Someone who's not here to change them, but to understand them. That's when they start to pull you closer, not just physically, but emotionally. That's when you start seeing a side of them the world has never seen. That's when you become the exception to their rule. Think about that for a second. In a world where they've learned to keep everyone out, they let you in. That's not a coincidence. That's not casual. That's deliberate. That's real. That's love in its most raw, courageous form. Because love, real love, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it shows up as a story whispered in the dark, or a look that says you can stay when words won't come. And when an avoidant starts showing you their real world, the parts they've hidden, the parts they're scared of, you're not just part of their day anymore. You're becoming part of their life. And that changes everything. Let's talk about something avoidants rarely give away easily: their time. For most people, love often looks like long talks, romantic dates, or spontaneous getaways. But for an avoidant, love can be far more subtle, and one of the biggest signs that they're in love with you is when they begin to make space for you in their carefully protected schedule. Avoidants thrive on independence. Their routines are their safe zones. Their calendar is not just about tasks and errands, it's their shield. It gives them control, it gives them order, and more importantly, it gives them distance from emotional chaos. So when an avoidant starts prioritizing you in that sacred schedule, that's not random. That's emotional investment on a level they rarely allow themselves to make. Maybe you notice they're suddenly more responsive. They actually follow up on a plan. They don't just say, let's hang out sometime, they lock in a day. Maybe they show up to support you at something important, even if it throws off their routine. That might seem basic to some people, but for avoidants, this is huge. They're not just showing up for an event. They're showing up for you. And let's be clear, they didn't have to. An avoidant will almost always default to solitude. It's how they recharge. It's how they keep emotional overwhelm at bay. But love rewires the system. When they start thinking, I'd rather be with you than be alone, that's when everything begins to shift. You'll start to notice little things. They start including you in their day-to-day activity, as maybe they want to run errands together. Maybe they cook dinner and ask you to join. Maybe they start texting in the middle of their workday just to check in. Again, these aren't just acts of kindness. They're rearrangements of emotional space. And they're rare. Now here's what's even more powerful. They don't just make time for you, they begin to protect that time. They cancel less. They reschedule with intention, not indifference. They start seeing the time you spend together as essential, not optional. And once that happens, you're no longer just someone they like, you're someone who matters. And yet you won't hear them say it outright. You won't get flowery confessions, but you'll feel it in how they plan, in how they show up, in how they start to remember the small things, your routine, your preferences, your emotional cues. They start adjusting not because you ask, but because they want to. That's the difference. In a world that constantly tells you love has to be loud, flashy, or dramatic, don't miss the beauty in the quiet shifts. When an avoidant starts weaving you into their schedule, that's not logistics, it's loyalty. It's not obligation, it's intention, because love isn't just about what you say. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice. And for an avoidant, time is the first and clearest sign that their heart is starting to open. And when that happens, you're no longer someone they're trying to avoid. You've become someone they're choosing to keep. Let's get real for a moment. Avoidants aren't known for sweet nothings or public displays of affection. In fact, you might often feel like you're the only one trying in the relationship, especially when they seem silent or emotionally distant. But here's what no one tells you. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, their actions speak volumes louder than their silence ever could. You see, avoidants aren't wired to express love in traditional ways. Their defense mechanisms built up over years of emotional self-protection tell them to stay quiet, to play it cool, to never reveal too much. But when love starts to break through those barriers, they begin to act in ways they can't even explain. And if you're paying attention, you'll see it, the small gestures, the consistent efforts, the subtle patterns that say, I care, even when their words won't. They might not say, I miss you, but they'll check in when they know you're going through something. They might not blurt out, I love you, but they'll fix something around your house, bring you something they noticed you needed, or remember a random comment you made 3 weeks ago. These aren't just favors. These are emotional investments disguised as practical support. And what's really beautiful, these actions aren't done to impress you. They're done because they feel compelled to do them, even if they don't fully understand why. That's love peeking through in a language that's native to them. They're showing up in the only way they know how, through doing, through serving, through being there. And it's in those moments when they drive out of their way just to see you for 10 minutes, when they pick up something for you without being asked, when they're willing to inconvenience themselves quietly that you need to understand something critical. This is their version of I love you. Avoidants are careful. They don't waste energy on people they don't see a future with. So when they consistently choose to act in your favor, when their behavior becomes rooted in thoughtfulness and reliability, it's not accidental. It's deeply intentional. It's their heart inching out of the shadows, slowly learning that being close to someone doesn't have to mean losing themselves. Now, here's the trap many people fall into. They wait for the verbal expression. They wait for the textbook romance. And when it doesn't come, they assume the avoidant. Wait for the textbook romance. And when it doesn't come, they assume the avoidant doesn't care. But that's not true. What looks like emotional withholding is often emotional overload. They're feeling more than they can say, so they do what feels safer, they act. So watch their actions. Listen to the consistency, not the volume. If they show up when it matters most, if they remember the things you thought they ignored, if they step in without being asked, they're loving you the only way they trust themselves to do it. And over time, the more emotionally safe they feel, the more these actions turn into habits. That's when you know it's real. That's when you know you've broken through. And at that point, it's not just about their silence anymore. It's about everything they're trying to tell you without saying a word. Let me tell you something most people completely overlook. Avoidants do feel jealousy, but it shows up in the most unexpected, subtle ways. And when it does show up, that's one of the clearest signs they're developing deep emotional attachment, maybe even love. See, avoidants aren't the type to blow up your phone, stalk your social media, or make a scene if they see you talking to someone else. That's not their style. In fact, they've trained themselves to appear cool, unbothered, detached. But behind that emotional armor is a heart that's starting to feel the one thing it's spent a lifetime avoiding: vulnerability. And vulnerability always invites fear, especially the fear of losing you. So how does jealousy show up in an avoidant? Quietly, indirectly, almost like a whisper. You'll notice it in a subtle shift in their tone when you talk about someone else. Maybe they make a sarcastic comment. Maybe they ask, so who was that? With a forced smile. Or maybe they suddenly withdraw a little after you casually mention a friend, someone they perceive consciously or unconsciously as competition. It's not obvious, but if you know what to look for, you'll see it clear as day. You might notice they become a little more attentive after such moments. Maybe they initiate contact more frequently, or they make spontaneous plans after being quiet for days. That's not coincidence. That's their fear of being replaced pushing them out of their shell. That's their love trying to protect its place in your life. And understand this, for someone who fears intimacy, admitting jealousy even to themselves is terrifying. They'll rarely say, I felt insecure, but their behavior will say it for them. They're not trying to control you. They're not trying to manipulate you. What's happening is their emotions have reached a level where they can't ignore you anymore, and with that comes the realization that they could lose you. And that's when everything changes. When an avoidant starts getting jealous, it means they've attached emotionally, even if they haven't admitted it yet. Their internal world is shifting. They're no longer just observing the relationship, they're invested in it. They're not just enjoying your company, they're beginning to fear your absence. And for someone who's spent their life building independence like armor, that's a revolutionary moment. So if you notice this quiet jealousy, don't use it to test them. Don't provoke it. That will only reinforce their fear and push them back into their shell. Instead, hold that moment with care. Recognize what it really means. It's not about control, it's about closeness. And for an avoidant, feeling close and safe at the same time. That's a rare, powerful sign that love is taking root. Because at the end of the day, when an avoidant starts showing signs of jealousy, it's not drama. It's not weakness. It's proof that your presence in their life is starting to matter more than their need to be distant. And when that happens, you're not just someone they enjoy, you're someone they're afraid to lose. Now, here's where it gets really powerful when an avoidant, someone who's built their entire emotional structure around needing space, begins to initiate physical touch and closeness. That's not just affection. That's a transformation happening right in front of your eyes. Avoidants don't reach out easily. In fact, physical intimacy, even small gestures like holding hands, a gentle touch on the back, or resting their head on your shoulder can feel incredibly exposing for them. Why? Because touch for many avoidants equals vulnerability. It's not just about the act, it's about what the act represents. When they touch you, they're letting you pass their defenses. They're allowing you into a space where they don't feel in control, and for someone wired for emotional safety, that's a big deal. So when they're the one to initiate that contact without being asked, without being pressured, that's love doing what logic cannot. It's their body responding to the comfort and connection they feel around you. They may not say, I trust you, but when they lean in during a conversation or put their arm around you in public, or even sit just a little closer than usual, it's their way of saying, you feel safe to me now. And the most remarkable part, they're not even fully conscious of it at first. These aren't calculated moves to impress you. They're instinctive, unfiltered. Their system is beginning to associate you with peace instead of pressure, warmth instead of fear. And that's when they start craving your presence in a way they never allowed themselves to before. You'll also begin to notice a subtle shift in how they respond to your touch. In the beginning, maybe they pulled back slightly or tensed up. Not because they didn't like you, but because closeness triggered old wounds. But now, they begin to soften. They allow the moment to linger. They start reaching for your hand instead of withdrawing from it. That's not just comfort. That's emotional safety finding a home. And here's what's really important. This isn't just about physical intimacy, it's about emotional permission. They're letting go of the old belief that closeness means losing themselves. They're learning with you that they can be close and still be whole, that they can connect without collapsing. And when that realization starts anchoring into their nervous system, they begin to want more, not less of you. They'll want to sit beside you longer. They'll want to touch your hand more often. They'll seek your presence not because they feel obligated, but because it makes them feel seen without being smothered. This shift is one of the clearest signs that their emotional wall is coming down. Not all at once, not dramatically, but intentionally. And when physical closeness starts to feel natural, not forced, not awkward, that's when you'll know you've crossed from being just a part of their life into being deeply connected to their emotional core. Because for an avoidant, touch isn't just touch, it's trust. And when they start choosing connection over distance, that's love speaking in the one language they never learned growing up. And now they're learning it with you. And here's the final sign, one that often goes unnoticed but carries massive emotional weight. When an avoidant starts sharing their future with you, not just vague hints or casual mentions, but when they begin weaving you into the fabric of their long-term plans, even subtly, it's a game changer. Avoidants don't think about the future lightly, especially not when it involves another person. Their default mode is self-reliance. Planning the future for them has always been a solo journey, a safe, controllable path with minimal emotional risk. But when love enters the equation, something starts to shift. Slowly and often without realizing it, they begin including you in their mental map of what's next. Maybe they start saying things like, we should check out that place next summer, or when I move next year, I'd want you to see the apartment with me. These might sound casual on the surface, but to an avoidant, those words represent emotional commitment. It means they're not just thinking about now, they're thinking about you being there later. And that is not something they do with just anyone. It doesn't stop at future events. It expands into life decisions. You'll notice them asking for your opinion on important matters. They'll start sharing goals, fears, dreams, things they used to keep locked inside. Maybe they talk about finances, relocating, or family situations. Maybe they suddenly open up about career moves and ask, what would you do? These aren't just conversations, they're connection points. They're building emotional bridges with you, one vulnerable moment at a time. And here's where it becomes even more powerful. They start adjusting their own plans based on you. Now that's rare. An avoidant typically resists change that feels out of their control, especially when that change involves emotional closeness. But when love begins to melt that resistance, they willingly start making space not just in their day, but in their destiny. That's not just affection, that's transformation. You'll hear it in how they speak. The I starts turning into we. The independent decisions start turning into mutual discussions. And while it may not be grand or overly romantic, it's consistent. It's deliberate. It's full of carefully measured trust. And the truth is, this sign is deeper than flowers or sweet words, because when an avoidant starts making future plans with you, they're confronting their deepest fear that closeness might destroy their freedom. But with you, they're discovering a new truth that closeness can be freedom too, that they don't have to choose between loving and being themselves, that they can share life with someone without losing their identity. That's why this sign matters more than any other, because for someone who spent their entire life building exits in every relationship, planning a future with you means they're finally locking the doors behind them. They're choosing presence. They're choosing hope. They're choosing you. Let's take a moment and zoom out, because everything we've uncovered points to one powerful truth. When an avoidant starts breaking their patterns, it's never random, it's revolutionary. You're not just watching small changes unfold, you're witnessing the slow cracking open of a heart that's spent years being afraid of closeness. And each key sign we've explored, whether it's them making time for you, expressing love through actions, showing jealousy, initiating touch, or talking about the future, is not just behavior. It's proof that they're in love, even if they don't yet have the words to say it. Avoidants are wired for emotional safety through distance. Their nervous system equates intimacy with danger. So when they choose to invite you closer, it's not because they've suddenly changed overnight. It's because they're starting to feel something they never expected, emotional safety with you. You are becoming their soft place to land, the person they feel seen by, heard by, and perhaps for the first time in their lives accepted by. And that right there is what opens the door to real, lasting love. Every one of these signs is like a breadcrumb leading you to their heart. But you need to understand that their love will never look like a romantic movie. It won't be loud declarations or constant validation. It will be quiet loyalty, subtle efforts, and brave steps toward connection, steps that may seem small to others, but are giant leaps for someone who has feared intimacy their whole life. When they love, it won't be perfect, but it will be real. And real is always better than perfect. The truth is, avoidants don't fall in love easily, but when they do, they fall with depth. They may not be able to articulate it clearly, but their love shows up in their willingness to make space for you, to open up about their plans, to allow you into their silence, and most of all, to stay, even when staying is uncomfortable. That's the ultimate sign. Not the words, not the fireworks, but the consistency, the effort. The quiet choosing of you over and over again in their own guarded yet meaningful way. So if you're seeing these signs, if they're making time for you, acting with love instead of just speaking it, showing subtle jealousy, inviting touch, or including you in their future, don't second guess it. Recognize it for what it is, a love story that doesn't scream, but stays. A kind of love that was never loud, but is deeply loyal. Because when an avoidant starts doing this, they're not just interested, they're in love. And they're learning with you how to trust love, maybe for the very first time. Thank you so much for sharing your time and energy with me today. I know this journey, especially when it comes to understanding avoidant attachment, can feel confusing, painful, and at times incredibly lonely. But remember this, just because love doesn't look the way we expected doesn't mean it isn't real. Sometimes the most beautiful connections are the ones that grow slowly, quietly, and courageously. If you're navigating a relationship with an avoidant or healing from one, give yourself grace. You are learning to love in a deeper, wiser way, and that takes strength. Keep showing up with clarity, compassion, and boundaries. And know that you're not alone in this process. You deserve a love that honors you, and when you embody that truth, it changes everything. Until next time, keep growing, keep loving, and never forget, the right person won't make you question your worth. They'll help you remember it. Thank you again for being here. Take care of your heart, and goodbye for now.